Okay, thank you all for turning out on this lovely evening. Just a quick note about next month's meeting, which is our infamous Christmas quiz. We're going to. I don't think I like infamous. It's a lovely Christmas quiz done by Margaret with Lindsay's valuable assistance. We've only got 42 places, so first come, first served. So please, when John sends out the notice, please do let him know, because otherwise you're going to be turned away at the door on the plane. But there will be wine and soft drinks and crisps and nibbles, exactly like we had last year, and it's going to be absolutely glorious. So on to this evening, and we've got Robin Ford, who, as you now know, is the manager of the Crowne Plaza, that magnificent building on the river, where in the summer months you can sit on a deck chair and watch the swans sail by. And if you're very lucky, you get an otter, which I did last time I did that, on the riverbank. Brilliant. Never seen one before. But anyway, Robin is going to talk to us about the ups and downs of hospitality and his journey. So please give him a big welcome.
Are you all right me standing here? Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for having me, first and foremost. I am just going to give you a little insight, I suppose, into my world and what a challenging year 2024 has been. I'm sure many of you heard about the fire or seen that we had a fire, and that was just the tip of the iceberg, to be honest. We had many other challenges so far this year. So I just cannot wait to get to 31st of December for the year to be over and done with. So who's this guy starting at the front? I'll just tell you a little bit about me. So I was born in Solihull, but I've not lived there since I was 18. I quickly left as quickly as I could and moved to London. And we moved to Stratford, me and my family, in 2018, so just before the pandemic. My career very much started at the bottom of the ladder and worked my way up. And I have a continued passion for food. So I wanted to be a chef, and that's what I started as. So I went into the industry as a chef and very quickly realised that it wasn't for me. And the reason for that is it was very old school mentality when I started. So I worked for a five-star hotel in the centre of Birmingham. It used to be called the St John's Swallow, I think. And magnificent hotel, very, very nice. But the kitchen and the environment there was very, very high pressure. And not a particularly nice environment for me to be in. So I did my time, did what I had to do, got my training, and then left the kitchen as quickly as I could. And then my career kind of went from there on upwards, to be honest. I got my qualifications in international hospitality management, and I suppose the rest of it was history to some extent. I've been the general manager at Crowne Plaza for just over 3 years. So took over, was it post the first lockdown or second lockdown? I can't remember. And yeah, my career has seen me work across the world. So I've been very, very fortunate that I've worked in a lot of the big cities in the UK. I've worked in Australia for a number of years. I've worked in Ireland as well. And my career has been primarily with big hotel brands. So household names that you would have heard of, such as Crowne Plaza, Hilton, Marriott. And then I've worked for some smaller privately owned hotels as well. My work has seen me travel, as I said, and relocate across the world, which has been wonderful. And I have a huge passion and enthusiasm for travel. And I think a lot of, my behaviours and the way that I lead my business has been as a result of the behaviours that I've learned from other people and the experience I've had from different cultures and those people that I've worked with. A lot of my career more recently has been within the West Midlands and in Manchester. Not sure why it was Manchester, if I'm honest, but that just seemed to be where I went to and where I stuck. My oldest two children were born there as well. And then, yeah, my roles, again, more latterly, have been much larger than Crowne Plaza Stratford. I've done a lot of single-site roles, some multi-site roles, and also national roles as well, where I was responsible for a hotel group across the UK. As the children were getting older and having new children come along as well, I decided that I needed a better work-life balance, and being away from home 4 nights a week I already lost one marriage. I wasn't going to lose a second. I needed to make a change. So yeah, we settled in Stratford in 2018. And as I say, we've been here since, and it's been a wonderful few years. And I've got to know it as my new home, I suppose. The realistic optimist, I suppose, where this come from was hospitality, as we know, is an industry that's 24/7. And I think definitely since COVID, it has become more impatient than ever. Obviously, I deal with customers every day, but the customer expectation, again, in my opinion, is very much about instant results. We're all customers, aren't we? I'm sure. Bigger, better, faster, quicker than ever before. And if you're unhappy, a lot of people threaten to go and write a review. They go to social media. It's instantaneous. You know, if somebody didn't like this evening, you can go online, you can write something immediately and the whole world can see it. So you've got to be pretty resilient. And mindset and growth mindset for me is where it all started. And you have to think differently if you want to grow and if you want to succeed. And this has been a big part of my success and the hotels that I've led, the success of those, by having that right mindset and imparting that on the team. I think if you asked me to run a marathon tomorrow, generally the answer would be no. But having that growth mindset and being that realistic optimist would actually say, well, not yet. I could run a marathon, but not yet, rather than saying no. And equally pushing the boundaries and ensuring that we don't just settle for the easy option and that we keep doing more, if possible, has very much led to the success of my business in the 3 years that I've been there, and I'll come on to some of that growth in a moment. But it's very much the ethos that we talk about when we're training our teams and we're coaching our teams to make sure that they're ready for success and they're ready for growth as well. And I talk a lot to my teams about, you know, your future and our future is defined by what you choose to do today. And if you choose to do nothing today, then that's up to you. If you choose to make a change and do something different, then generally you'll go on to do something a lot more. So just a bit of a flavour of the business. So Stratford's largest hotel, one of the largest meetings and event venues in the UK. So 259 rooms. We have 15 meeting spaces. Our ballroom, which many of you may have been in there, caters for up to 550 people. We have our Riverside Terrace, as you have said, Jan, a health club. And the business going into 2025 turns over £18 million growth, £18 million, which is a £4 million growth since pre-COVID and when I took over the business. So significant success story. Sadly, we did have a fire this year, which I'll come on to later. But yeah, the business is in great shape. Clearly, our owners always want more, which I'll come on to. But as a destination, we serve over 200,000 people a year, which is a significant amount of people. We operate generally at 87% occupancy year round. Some months are slightly higher than that, some months are slightly more, but averages out at 87%. And it really is that meetings and events piece. So, you know, if I think of this evening as an example, we have a large cybercrime conference that arrives tonight. They're in now for 3 days. That conference is 550 people every day. So the numbers start to add up when you add that in. And if we did have that conference where they weren't staying in the hotel, which again is fairly regular, we do that sort of stuff, we'll have conferences that will just be for a day. It's not what we would call residential. Once you add the 259 bedrooms on top as well, when sometimes there'll be 2 people in those rooms, we can have, you know, 12, 13, 1,400 people in the hotel at any one time. So it's a very, very big operation. We're a local employer, as you can appreciate. We have just over 200 employees. I think this morning it's 204, and just under 80% of them live within a CB37 postcode as well. So again, there's a lot going back into the town, a lot going back into the economy from our teams in terms of where they stay, where they rent, and where they spend their money. The cost of acquiring the business has only increased. When I talk about acquiring the business, I talk about buying business in. So we do a lot of groups, we do lots and lots of meetings business, and that business generally will come through agencies, and you have to pay a commission to those agencies, anywhere from between 10 to 13%. Labour costs and the quality of labour remains a massive challenge. Again, if I think back to 2021 versus going into next year in 2025, our labour cost has generally increased by about 23%. Significant growth in terms of what we're now having to pay people. And generally our operating costs are significantly more than ever before. We've just finished our budget for next year. And again, there's £500,000 worth of costs that are going into next year before we take another single pound. That's just literally standing still, no top line growth at all, just additional cost. A lot of that is to do with national living wage changes, but again, business rates, the change that's happening, going from 75% relief to 40% relief, significant growth in terms of cost of actually running the business. The brand itself, Crowne Plaza, and I don't want to get overly technical, but I just want to give you a bit of a flavour of the ownership of the hotel and how it works. So obviously Crowne Plaza is the name that we have above the door, that's our brand. And we procure that brand through a franchise model from this company here called IHG. So the nearest example I could give you of a similarity, I suppose, is if you look at the McDonald's in the high street, the person that physically owns that McDonald's in the high street could be a very different person that owns the McDonald's 10 minutes down the road. So it's a franchise model. So we pay IHG around 6% of our turnover each year to have that brand above our door. And this is the other brands that IHG have in their portfolio. So again, some of those you may have seen, you may have heard of, things like Holiday Inn, Intercontinental. It's all part of the same family of brands. Prospercap is our ownership group. They are a fairly new business. We were taken over by Prospercap for all intents and purposes this year. Prospercap is owned 80% by the people that owned the business before. So apart from the other 20%, in theory, it's the same ownership group. And then Prospercap employ a company called Valor Hospitality that manage the hotel on their behalf. And Prospercap have 17 hotels within the UK and Europe, and Valor Hospitality manage all of them on behalf of Prospercap. And then, as I say, Valor then have a franchise agreement with IHG to have Crowne Plaza above the door. So all of our employees are employed by Prospercap. I'm employed by Prospercap, so I work for the owner. But weirdly enough, I take direction from Valor, not from Prospercap. So it gets very political at times. You have to wear a couple of caps. Hospitality role. So, you know, hotels, it's not all about food and beverage. There's lots and lots of different roles that we have within hospitality. Yes, clearly it is food and beverage, and clearly it is meetings and events. But some of these additional roles here, people often don't think about. So they don't think about our property teams, our engineering teams. They don't think about our legal and compliance teams. They don't think about the sales and marketing and the commercial teams that go into physically getting the business to start with, to obviously make sure that we can run and exist. Very, very vibrant business, very, very global business, as you can appreciate, and a business which I love. You know, if you cut me in half, I absolutely bleed hospitality. So positioning for achievement, I'd love to say that there is a massive strategy that goes behind what we do, and it's over analytical and over technical, but believe me, it's not. I like to try and keep it simple, and generally, I'll just come back to that slide. It's all about people. It is 100% all about people. And if we can get the people element right, then the rest of it generally will flow. And, you know, I often say to the teams, and, you know, said to teams before, success, it's a journey. It's not the end destination. It's just the journey that we go on. And we're actually okay to make mistakes, and we're actually okay for there to be stumbling blocks along the way. And whilst I'm the leader of the business, I'm the least important person in that hotel. The most important people are the people that are on the ground and the people that are making it happen. So our people are absolutely what get us going. And we talk a lot about personality. We talk a lot about passion. We talk about being authentic. We talk about this commitment to best, and we talk about playing your part. And this really is the key behaviours that we really look for when we're recruiting people, particularly the personality. I often say that if you've got the personality right, you're 80% of the way there. The rest of it, you can be taught. You can be taught how to make a coffee, you can be taught how to carry a tray, you can be taught how to check someone into the hotel. You can't be taught that personality and that love for genuinely wanting to do what you do. We have a purpose and vision, as many companies do. Very, very simply at Stratford, it's about great people, creating excellence, delivering best. And if any of you ever went in our back of house areas, this is plastered everywhere, and we talk about it every day. And again, it's incredibly simple. It's about people, it's about excellence, and it's about best. Yes, we have lots and lots of measures because we like to be analytical. We like to measure guest sentiment. We like to know whether people are happy, whether they're sad, whether we've done a good job, whether we've done a bad job. And as I alluded earlier, bless you, it is about measuring, and it is about not being afraid of our failures. So we have spreadsheets, we have data, we have all the things that we could possibly think of that give us indicators, but lots and lots of measurements. And then the biggest thing really, I suppose, is about that creativity and that innovation. I go back to what I said at the start around pushing the boundaries and not accepting the unacceptable. We celebrate a lot around new ideas. We celebrate a lot around being innovative. And ultimately, what's going to separate us from some of our competitors, particularly in Stratford, of which there is clearly lots of hotels. It is important to fail, and I talk a lot to the team about failure. Some businesses, it's a naughty word. They don't like the fact that you admit that you fail. For us, I'm very, very happy that we say that didn't work. What can we learn from it? How can we do better next time? Because if we don't fail, then we're never going to grow. We're never going to succeed. Going back to that delivering best and that creating excellence, we like to learn from others as well. And I go back to, not overcomplicating things and learning from others. My personal experience is some of the best hospitality that I've ever witnessed and I've ever had has been within Germany and within the Middle East, particularly Dubai. And I spend a lot of time in both of those places. Germany, my oldest two children and my ex-wife live in Germany now, sadly. So I spend a lot of time in Germany every month because clearly I go to visit them. And then I spend a lot of time in Dubai. We have 7 hotels there, but also from a hospitality perspective, I go there because it's a learning trip. I'm there again next week for a couple of days. And it's amazing from an innovation and a creativity perspective, how much further they are in the world in terms of hospitality than many, many other countries, including the States and including Asia Pacific. So yeah, we spend a lot of time there learning. We spend a lot of time there looking at what they do, what we don't do, and how we can potentially bring that back to the UK and transfer some of those skills and behaviours to us. We're very, very local, community inclusive, and that isn't what I would have said to you if I was standing here and I took over the business. I think Crowne Plaza maybe in the past was considered this big local corporate that maybe didn't want to be involved in the local community. We've worked really, really hard to change that. We're very, very open to working within the community, and we do a lot for the community. We just don't shout about it. And I think that's probably something which I'm guilty of, because I don't necessarily always shout about the great things that I do or we do. We're quite humble. We just crack on and get it done. But yeah, last year we contributed around £45,000 in cash donations to various local community groups. And again, we're very much on track for doing that next year. Not so much this year because of the fire that we had, so we've not done as much, but very much on track to do that next year. So again, if anyone is representing any local community groups and there is anything you feel that we can do to work in hand, please don't hesitate to shout. Green is massive for us, and is only becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. We have to go through a huge amount of tenders to win business, and I don't think there is any tender that we will have participated in probably the last 2 years where we've not had to submit some of our green credentials. I go back to what I said earlier about measurement. We measure our electrical output by kilowatt hour and by cost every single hour of the day, 24 hours a day, and we have to report those statistics. We have to discuss what our carbon footprint is. We have to discuss what our CO2 emissions are. All of those sorts of things get reported out to many, many companies. Jaguar Land Rover is a great example who we work with, and we work with quite closely. They're a partner of ours and we do a lot of business with them. It's like choking a donkey, the amount of paperwork you have to go through to win a contract with them. NFU is another great example of where there's a whole stream of stuff. So as a business, we've had to adapt, we've had to change. One of the, I suppose, the elephant in the room is that we have a building that's now 52 years of age. And if we were to build that hotel today, we would build it very, very differently to possibly how it has been built. So there's some catching up to do. We have a couple of combined heating and power units, which again, without getting over technical, it's positive from an electricity perspective because we're saving on one thing, but we're heavily spending on another. We're just about to pilot a new scheme where all of our customers and all of our conference delegates can now write off 100% of their CO2 emissions when they're staying with us through a new scheme, which is about biodiversity, it is about planting new trees, and it's about carbon offsetting. So we're just about to launch that in December, which I think will be one of the UK's first in terms of a hospitality establishment that's doing that sort of thing. So we're very, very proud of that. The biggest part around our green strategy is around our education. Clearly, we can do the big picture items, turning off light bulbs, changing halogen bulbs for LED, all of which we have done. The challenge is that some of the newer hotels, as I allude to, they're always going to be much further ahead than we are because they've got smarter buildings. We spent, even during the fire, we spent around £1 million building improvements around things like lighting, around automating lighting, moving more to sensors, things like our heating now being on a different system to what we had before. So whereas we used to have 4 boilers boiling all the time, we've now got on-demand boilers. So again, much more efficient than what we had before. But the list is endless. And I'm really only touching the start of this, if I'm honest. Whilst we do a lot, there is a huge amount more for us to do within the community and within our business to really be at the top of the tree where we possibly should be. Hotel fire. Who's got questions on the hotel fire? So as I'm sure it's been well documented and you saw, 29th of April, the hotel had a fire. What you probably don't know is we actually had 2 fires in April. So if I just wind the clock back, actually, if I tell you the year that I've had in 2024, so I welcomed a new child on the 9th of January, which was wonderful. We had a fire, no we didn't, we had a flood, I think 3 days after Rory was born, because the river flooded, again, well documented. So that caused a couple of tens of thousands of pounds worth of damage. And our leisure club was off for a couple of weeks. We then had another flood 2 weeks later, which again was a shock. My wife had a heart attack in March. On the 1st of April, we had a fire. And on the 29th of April, we had another fire. And in between that, the ceiling in reception of the hotel also fell down. So it's been an unlucky year. And I would love to stand here and say the reason that we had a fire in the reception, ceiling fell down, and the flood was because we are absolutely crap at maintaining the building and we don't look after it, but nothing could be further from the truth. Clearly, someone has not been watching over me this year, is what I would say, because it's not been a good year. So yes, so we had a very, very small fire at the beginning of April. No bigger than a waste paper basket fire. Thought it was very strange. Never really dwelled on it, if I'm honest. Was slightly suspicious about how it started, but you move on, don't you? And then, yeah, on the 29th of April, we obviously had a very, very big fire. The likely cause is arson on both occasions. So I think it's fairly well documented in the paper about the 29th being arson. I don't think anyone will ever put money on to say that it was, because I don't, you know, from a fire brigade perspective and the police, they can't 100% say it was arson. But what they can say is there was no other factors that it couldn't have been. So it was arson as far as we're concerned. So yeah, so £11 million later, and what were we closed? 4 months? Yeah, 4 months. We're back open, which is nice to be able to say. Thankfully, everyone got out of the building, of course. The hotel was full that evening. We were full with a 2-day conference. If there was any consolation, is what I would say, is the conference, all the people that were attending the conference, it was all single occupancy. So generally, our hotel will have between 460 and 600 people sleeping in it most nights. On that particular night, because all of the rooms were only single occupancy, there's only one person in each room, we only had, I think it was 269 people in the hotel, so a couple of rooms had 2 people in. So the evacuation and the elements, I suppose, that then followed were significantly quicker than what it would have been if we'd had 500-600 people in the hotel. So yeah, thankfully, everything that we rehearse and we train worked the way that it should have done. There is always lessons to be learned, of course. So one of the biggest lessons that we found was we have 2 reciprocal agreements with 2 establishments in Stratford, which is around 5-6 planning. I won't tell you what they are because it's unfair, but both of them fell short on the night, so neither fulfilled their duty on the night. So that was an issue, clearly, because our fallback position is to evacuate the customers to another hotel. That hotel refused to help. And then the other position, which is a much larger venue in Stratford, is to vacate people to there. And that's not just for my hotel, that's for many establishments in Stratford. And the person that should have taken that phone home with them to answer that call didn't. So no one, including the fire brigade, could get hold of that venue. So we were very, very fortunate that a gentleman called Alistair at the Red Lion pub on the gyratory opposite, I think he must have lived in there. He saw all the commotion going on and saw blue lights and said, "Can I open my pub for you?" So I could have kissed him. So you absolutely can, definitely, thank you. And we evacuated everybody to there. And that was the saviour, I'm not gonna lie, it was the saviour. Because one thing that you never ever think is going to happen is that people are going to be outside for as long as possibly that they were. Because again, we have 2 fallback positions, so they're going to go somewhere, it's all going to be fine. Other lessons from the night was water. People wanted bottles of water. We have thousands of bottles of water in the hotel. Problem is they're all in the hotel and we couldn't get into the hotel because there was a fire. So that was another big learning, is so how do we stop that happening in future? So if anyone's ever thirsty, we have a few thousand bottles of water now also stored outside the hotel. 4 blankets, people are cold, we have 4 blankets, but again, 4 blankets are kept inside the hotel in the fire room. We had a fire, we couldn't get back in. So yeah, there was lots of things which, when we talk about it now, you think, well, surely you would have planned these things, surely you would have thought about these things when you rehearse. But never in any of the years, I suppose, certainly in my career and some of my colleagues, had we ever thought about relocating some of this equipment outside the building. Clearly we have now. So yeah, so everyone was out, everyone was accounted for on the first roll call. Because understandably a few people were getting cheesed off that it was now cold, they decided to go and sit in their cars. That created an issue because we were then 36 people short when we did a second roll call. So then we spent 2 hours trying to find those 36 people, which sadly had a counter effect. But anyway, we're here to tell the tale, and that's the most important thing. So I suppose what that has enabled us to do, I suppose, is it's enabled us to do some investment in the hotel for the months that we were closed. The actual fire itself, which was in a disused plant room on a mezzanine floor of the hotel, very, very peculiar. We don't have a mezzanine floor in the hotel apart from one particular area, and it's an area that's called the projection room. And I think when the hotel was built and the ballroom was obviously done, you must have projected into the ballroom from this room. So it's essentially a disused plant room, and that's where the fire was. And the fire was very, very well controlled, if I'm honest. The actual fire itself was quite small. What caused the damage was the smoke and the water. So I had been campaigning for 2 years to get a new carpet in the ballroom. And believe it or not, 6 weeks before the fire, we replaced the carpet. So if again, thankfully we're insured. So yeah, it was again, you couldn't make it up, could you? Honestly, you literally could not make it up. So we have a nice shiny brand new ballroom now, which looks lovely. Not that it didn't look lovely before, but we took the opportunity to enhance certain areas of the hotel, such as some bedrooms. So we totally refurbished 63 of the 259 rooms. The ballroom has had a total makeover. A number of public areas have had a makeover as well. And then the function room, if anyone's familiar with the hotel, the function room, which is at the end of the hotel, which I think used to be a bar or a pub back in the day, called the Seymour Suite now. That will not be back until March, but that was planned anyway. So yeah, the bulk of the damage was smoke and water related. So we took 13,000 litres of water out of just the first section of the ballroom alone in the 2 days after. And the one thing, again, lessons to be learned, the one thing that alarmed me, I suppose, I was relatively being the optimist. I saw, we're going to sort this, it's fine. Bedrooms are fine. Looking at the first glance of the hotel, everything is okay. We will partition off this section, which is where the fire was. We'll lose those meeting rooms, but we can continue to trade. Probably after a week, it's all fine. So I announced to the team that, we're looking to be closed for probably a period of 2 weeks, but we'll be back in business quite quickly. What we didn't realise until we started to treat walls and we started to put this, it's like a protective lacquer that you put on things to kind of clean and seal in smoke, was that the smoke actually was behind the walls. That was the damage. So the smoke gets behind the plasterboard. So in the ballroom ceiling, as an example, which is initially it's a false ceiling, there was no way that we could get, behind the ceiling enough to clean it. So the ceiling had to come down. So quite quickly, what we thought was going to be 2 weeks became 4 months, because we had to rip walls down, we had to rip ceilings down. That was the only way we could ever make sure that if you're in there, you're not going to think, I can smell smoke. Or if you're lying in bed at night, you're thinking, I can smell smoke. And fundamentally, we're in the business of selling sleep. That's what we do. We sell bedrooms, don't we? So we definitely didn't want that to happen. So yeah, as I say, £11 million later, 4 months closed, we're back open and we're back, which is wonderful. We retained all the staff throughout the period of closure. So everybody was retained, everyone was paid in full. That was one of the things that was the most important thing for me, is that everyone kept their job and everybody had a job, and that we kept everyone, because it's very difficult to attract great people to start with. And the last thing that I wanted is that we lost people, because truthfully, we would never get them back. We're all crying out for people sometimes. So, if I lost staff to here, this hotel would be overjoyed and they'd swallow them up. They'd never come back to me. So yeah, we retained everybody. We had about 30 vacancies in the hotel anyway at the point of the fire. So we obviously didn't recruit for those until we were getting closer to opening. But yeah, as I say, in line with that growth, £18 million, we have never had 204 employees before. So we're very, very much in a great position. And the business is booming, really, and our outlook certainly for 2025. And I can never tell you what the road is going to look like in 2025, because I didn't know what it was going to look like this year. Look how it's turned out. But I am very confident to say that, business, certainly within the meetings and event sector, is incredibly buoyant, and people want to come to Stratford for a whole raft of reasons. I always say that there's a lot more to Stratford than Shakespeare, and there definitely is. And it's a real success story and a positive story, as far as I'm concerned. I just think that we're going to be in for a very tough year next year in terms of that profitability. because I can see those costs that obviously are mounting on us already. Okay, so that's a very quick flavour of the year that we've had, and the challenges, I suppose, that come with running a hotel in the modern age. I'm happy to take any questions that you've got. I'm an open book. I'll be as truthful as I can. Please.
Well, two things. First of all, I hope the wife's okay.
Yes, she's fine.
Great.
She's fine. Yeah, it's really peculiar. There's no treatment either. You don't have any treatment. You have a heart attack and you just leave it. Yeah. Yeah. She's good though. Thank you. Yes.
Good. And the second question is, can you give some examples of how hospitality in Dubai is further ahead than the rest of the world?
So,
What do they do?
I would say, from a new hotel perspective, so if you're building a new hotel, they are very, very considerate about how they design their buildings and their assets. And they 100% think about the customer and the end experience, versus what I feel we do primarily in the UK is it's about maximising the space for your money. So if you can get 290 rooms in a hotel which has got ordinarily 259 rooms, then we will, because it's about bang for your buck. Whereas in Dubai, they're very much thinking about the user experience more, and yeah, they're a very wealthy country. And I dread to think where some of the money comes from sometimes, but you know, ultimately they are exceptional in terms of hospitality. One thing that they do, and it would be an unfair comparison, and that's why I don't talk about it, is clearly we're not on a parallel in terms of rates of pay, in terms of the labour market. You know, as I say, I go there probably 4 times a year, and you know, I talk to people, and they're probably paid, I don't know, £1,000 a month, and the equivalent to some of those roles, particularly in chefs here, would probably be £3,000 a month. Yeah. So there's no comparison from that point, but because of that, they sometimes can have 2-3 times the amount of staff than we would have within the UK. That's why generally the service levels can be a lot greater. But I didn't use that because that would be an unfair comparison. For me, it is very much about the design. It's about their training. There's a lot of businesses in Dubai where you will not even touch the floor or go to talk to any customer until you have gone through 2 months of, you know, off-floor intensive training. And that's because they invest in that training. And that's a very, very difficult, difficult balance, I find, within the UK and Europe, because we don't invest in that training at all. You know, we do invest in training, don't get me wrong, but we certainly wouldn't take someone 2 months. We wouldn't say to you, you know, welcome to the team. For the next 2 months, you're fully paid. I don't want to talk to any customers. We're just going to go through an intensive training program. That's where they get it right and we get it wrong.
Can I just follow that up with your comment that people come to Stratford for more than Shakespeare?
Yeah.
So your perspective of what they come for.
Yeah.
But linked to that is, are you impacted by the fact on the corner of Bridge Street, the old VHS building, is slowly rotting?
Yeah.
What would you put in there?
What
What
would I put in there? I don't want to say the wrong thing because you might all have your own opinions.
It was a right or wrong answer.
So do you know what? I had a conversation with someone, I think 2 weeks ago. So what I personally think needs to happen, because I don't know who owns the building, and I've asked that question many, many times, who ultimately is the owner of the asset. I think there needs to be a bit of a community project to let's get rid of the fact that it says BHS, let's strip all that off. I think we need to work with a sign making company to get all the windows tarted up so it just looks presentable. I think there could be a community initiative of getting all the weeding done, getting all the planting done. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money at all. So I'm not talking of tens and tens of thousands of pounds here. Just get that gateway looking smart. I think that's the first thing that needs to happen. And I genuinely do think, and I say this with my hand on my heart and all sincerity, that could be achieved. And it could be achieved within the next 2 weeks if we wanted to. There's no reason that can't be done. I don't think Stratford needs any more hotel rooms, personally. Now, that's not me saying that because I'm concerned about the competition. I'm saying that because there is a hotel going into Debenhams. The Shakespeare Hotel will reopen next year. I think we're okay. And I look at the market forecast, I look at the supply and demand of my own hotel, and I look at where we measure ourselves against the other hotels in Stratford. I'm going to go a long way of answering your question, but let me just come back a second. Again, I don't want to go over it analytical here, but there's a metric that all hotels across the world report into. It's called STR. And we measure our occupancy, we measure our room rate, and we measure something called RGI, Revenue Generation Index. And that's the key metrics within the hospitality world that you measure a hotel by. So whilst I don't know the specific occupancy of the Doubletree by Hilton tonight, I will know tomorrow the occupancy of the market, because the Doubletree fills in the same details as I fill in, and it gives me an analysis of the market. So I know from those statistics how Stratford as a town trades in terms of hotel occupancy. So there is not demand, in my opinion, for another hotel to be built. And I think it is a positive that hotels are going through refurbishment, because it enhances the product, it enhances the rate, it's bringing other types of clientele to Stratford, which for me is a positive. I think what is needed in VHS is probably, and what I think probably will happen, is it will be a little bit of mixed use. I think there will be inevitably some residential in there, probably some apartments. I think there will be some retail. They'll probably balance the risks slightly. I think there will be some hospitality in there to some extent. I just don't think it should be a hotel. Anything is better than what's there at the moment. I think the balance that always needs to be striked is, Stratford Town and the High Street for me is a jewel in our crown, but I think rents are only going up. I think the shop fronts in some locations around town are only becoming more derelict. I think there's an increasing amount of retail from what I have seen which don't have people in. And from talking to, talking to the bid, talking to the town trust, I think there's a number of assets where they don't want to put somebody in. They're happy to not have someone in there, for a whole range of reasons. So yeah, I think it needs to be probably some mixed use. Yeah.
This is a comment, not a question.
Please.
But you say people are very quick to give a bad review.
Yes.
Well, can I give a good review? Because I've been in the gym and the leisure centre for a long, long time. And it's a really very friendly and well-run organisation. And during the fire, we could have all been forgotten, but we weren't. And it was brilliant, the way they kept in touch. We had social evenings, and it's come back now, stronger with classes.
Yeah.
And so, pass that praise on, because members really appreciate it. And I think it's nice sometimes for good things to be said, people moaning.
Yeah. And generally, I mean, we do get it right a lot of the times. It is, I go back to what I started by saying, and maybe we're all a little bit guilty of this sometimes, because I think hospitality isn't free-flowing nowadays in a lot of locations. You don't get genuine hospitality, and people are not there because they genuinely want to service you and they want you to have a great experience. It's very difficult to try and get people in a mindset to offer genuine hospitality, but certainly with the leisure club, from the date that we closed, we knew that we were going to have an issue here, because there is so much competition anyway in terms of health clubs in Stratford, and we couldn't have a bigger competitor than the club next door. It's got 4,500 members, and it's cheaper than us. But for us, it's something that's much bigger than that. It's about the family feel. It is about joining the family. It is about that social experience that you said. So I am pleased that has worked. And we spent a lot of time debating about what we should do, what we shouldn't do. I was very, very nervous that I think pre-fire we had 540 members, I think. I think we're probably 460 now. Yeah, 460. We lost a number of people, which is inevitable during the period of closure. But I was very, very concerned that people like yourself that have been very loyal for a number of years, we would just lose everybody. And that would be a really, really difficult base to come back from. I don't actually think we would ever come back from it. I think if we ever got to the stage where we only had 100 members, I think we would have closed it.
Yeah.
For any, I don't think it would ever reopen personally. Yeah.
Can I just add to that? Because one of the things you mentioned, one of the first things that we were told by the staff there was that you'd laid nobody off.
They were so grateful.
And they were so appreciative of that. And the customers were very appreciative for them because we all like them.
Yeah.
And we really appreciated that. Can I then ask a question?
Please.
Why is it in all hotels? This is an aim
Oh,
directly
I know what
at
you're
you.
going to say.
They always have a duvet that's as thick as the mattress.
Like a meringue.
Do you offer?
It gets too hot.
I now hotel. I always take my own duvet. It comes in kits when I arrive because it's like sleeping underneath. Sort of, you know. So, what is? Do you offer a thinner duvet
Or a blanket.
or a blanket?
We offer blankets. Yeah, we do have blankets. I think so. So one of the things that we did during the period of closure, because again, I was very concerned about the soft furnishings, is we replaced all the beds. So every room, whether it's been refurbished or not, has had a new bed. It's had all new duvets, pillows, everything's been totally replaced. Yeah, the company that supply the royal family called Hypnos is who we went with, and despite spending £500,000 with them, you think they would have given me a bed, wouldn't you? So all of our bedding has changed. And again, we spent a lot of time, it's actually a really valid question you asked, picking the duvets and the pillows. I think, if I'm being brutally truthful with you, it's about that comfort factor, yeah, is what I would say. But all of our pillows, all of our duvets, they're all hollow fibrous. They're not goose down or feather. Allergies play a big part of that. You shouldn't be hot. Come and stay and tell me if you will. I'll sort you a roommate and you let me know. But you shouldn't be hot. Yeah, you shouldn't be.
Unless it's a very, very thin duvet.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot like me. Yeah, look, there's a friend here just said he's the same.
But the first thing I do at night when I go home is, well, when I get into bed, is I take the duvet off me as well.
Yeah.
It's interesting. That's just because I've learned in my years of marriage that you just don't argue with your wife.
But we
We've got a brilliant one. It's 4 tog his side. It's a king size. 4 tog his size, 9 tog mine. We've had it for years.
Yes.
Brilliant.
Yeah. First thing
All
I do is
winter.
take all the pillows, the 9 pillows that are on the bed, go on the floor, which is ironic in itself. And then, yeah, take all the crap off the bed and then get in. But I don't like. Yes, please, yes. Whoever, please. Yeah.
Thanks for your talk, Robin.
You're very welcome.
I'm interested in carbon footprints of hotels.
Yes,
So,
huge.
yes, and I imagine all the hotels in Stratford are all saying they're very green. How do you tell the hotels which are really trying to reduce their carbon emissions as opposed to those who are just going in for greenwash? Is there a way
Yeah,
that
yeah.
you would tell the difference?
It's really difficult because there is, I think greenwashing is really important and that's not what we want to do. I would rather be defending why we have not done something than, bless you, just greenwashing and ticking a box, because that's what a lot of people do. There is so many elements within hospitality that are so costly and a minefield to get right. Even things like waste. You know, it took me a year to renegotiate our waste contract with our bin company to try and strike the right balance between general waste, dry mix recycling, food waste, oil waste. That's another thing we have because our deep fryers have oil in. And generally, it's like an uphill battle. You know, everything is against you at every moment, and it shouldn't be like that. What we say to our hotels is, we don't do statistics and we don't do tick boxes. So if we have a hotel that isn't as green as could be, we park that and we say, well, that's where you are. If I look at, we have a Hilton in Manchester, which I was general manager of before I came to Stratford. Much more modern building, pretty new. Its carbon footprint is minimal in comparison to Stratford. But you just take that into consideration. My view is you just have to keep going. And that's what I say to my teams. You know, we are never going to be the greenest hotel within Stratford because part of the hotel's built on a tip and it's a 1970s building. There is only so much that we're going to do. So we make up in other areas. So for me, being able to, you to be able to offset your carbon when you come to stay, for me is a real positive. Being able to increase the amount of electrical charging stations that we have for cars, as an example. You know, whether you subscribe to the fact that an electric car is the way to go or not, you know, from a business perspective, if I think, again, I'm going off a tangent, there's a reason why Mitsubishi, really good example to give you. We did a big conference this year for Mitsubishi, and 25% of all the delegates that came to that conference, and it was a conference of 400 people, had to be able to charge their car in the car park. I argue that there's no hotel in the UK that I'm aware of that would have 100 charging points. It's unreasonable to suggest that. But that was a prerequisite that if we wanted the business, we had to be able to guarantee 100 charging points. So we had to make a very difficult decision. Did we rent in charging points that, believe it or not, you can do, which I didn't think you could, but you can. Basically a massive battery that they put in your car park and you can charge cars from. Or do we make the decision that we're not going to take the business? And I took the decision that we just weren't going to take the business. It came full circle, but they then came back to us and we got the business anyway, because I think they realised that what they were asking for was not achievable. So yeah, for me, that the investment in more charging points is something which we've debated many, many times, and we will do next year. We will have more charging points. Things like lighting, you know, when we had the fire, making sure that everything that we possibly could procure was as green and sustainable as it possibly could be. Having to make some really unpopular, you know, decisions. The beds, as an example. You know, we spent £500,000 on 259 beds. The nearest comparative was half the cost. We would have saved £250,000 by going with another provider, but they weren't sustainable. The mattresses were not filled with sustainable and recyclable materials, and I just wasn't happy that that was the right thing to do. Thankfully, the insurance company backed me on the decision, but you know, we could have gone a very different way. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thanks. Was it very difficult to choose your offsetting scheme? Because they can be quite dodgy, some of them, can't they?
If you want to make some money, I'd go into it,
Yeah.
because there isn't many people that do offsetting for hotels.
Yeah.
I think there's only 3 companies that we came across that did it. It wasn't overly complex, no. There's a number of things that I don't particularly agree with and don't understand. The government's definition around true carbon offsetting has to be that you are protecting you're protecting a forest outside of the UK. And the reason for that is that protecting the forest in the UK apparently is 5 times the cost. So because of that, your money doesn't go as far. So it goes overseas. I don't think many people know that, because I didn't know that. So I obviously went in there with the view that really happy to subscribe to the scheme, but I wanted the scheme to benefit the UK and for the offsetting to be in the UK, not Peru, as an example. So that was a big deciding factor. And also, where does the money go? So does the money go into planting a tree and, you know, rewilding forestry and those sorts of things? And where are those forests? Or does it go into paying off a supplier so they don't cut down a rainforest? That was very, very interesting as well, because I learned that a lot of money doesn't actually go into rewilding or planting trees. It goes into paying a supplier to not do what they were going to do. Don't talk about that very often, do we? So yeah, it was a real education, but there's not many people that are doing it within a hospitality setting. So yeah, so that is what's going to happen in 2025. I'm going to leave. I'm going to set up my own carbon offset business. These.
I too would like to start with a positive point, which is my friends and I are very pleased that now this the literary festival
Yes.
is held at the Crowne Plaza, because your ballroom is ideal for that. And also there's free parking, which is
Yeah.
useful. And might I just say, on behalf of my friend, it'd be nice to have a few more disabled parking places.
Okay.
We do find it's rather limited and they usually already taken. But what I do want to say is when people come out, they invariably go to the bar. And I was very much hoping that when you had the fire, after you had the fire, you would actually rebuild that area. Because there is always a chaotic here.
Yes.
People complain, in fact, I encourage them to come along tonight and actually talk to you directly. They complain about the order, and sometimes your own staff look very harassed, understandably, with what is going on there.
Yeah.
It would have been nice if you could have rebuilt that bar. And also I was terribly disappointed to see that those 3 black lampshades didn't go with the fire.
So shall I start on a positive? So the black lampshades, the ones in reception that you're talking about.
Yeah.
So they will be going shortly. Because I have some lampshades that are going to replace them. So they will be going shortly, hopefully in time for the next festival,
Oh, yeah.
which I think is May.
Yes.
So watch this space.
I watched the lampshades.
Yes, and if you want them. Yeah. The accessible parking is, it's a valid point. Wasn't aware that it was so much of an issue. So I will take that back. The policing of it is the problem.
Yeah.
It's amazing how many people park in accessible spaces
Yeah.
that don't need an accessible space. So I'll take that back and look at that as well around the
What
policing of
happens
it.
is I have to drop my friend off
Yeah.
at the ramp with her walker, and I have to go and find a place
find
on the
space,
main
yeah.
car park.
Okay, I'll have a look at that. The bar,
The bar.
sadly, well, not sadly, it's a positive, negative. The fire didn't touch the bar.
Yeah.
So because of that, the bar didn't get touched apart from some cosmetic works. I don't want to give much away from an Annie perspective at the Literature Festival, but it's a real bone of contention, the fact that we're very busy with the Literature Festival. We don't make a lot of money on food and drink during the Literature Festival for a number of reasons. Some of that might be pricing. Some of that might be it's so busy you can't actually get a cup of tea or coffee.
Yes.
Some of that might be that people bring their own. Totally get that as well. So one of the things that we have discussed, and I met with Annie, said to Jan, it was the last week, the week before, talking about the next couple of events and what we can do differently. So one of the things that I'm hopeful to do is that we're going to set up the Seymour Suite that I mentioned at the end, which is currently being rebuilt, that is being totally reconfigured. We're hopeful that that is going to be just an exclusive food and beverage area just for the Literary Festival. So you won't have to go to the main bar. Of course you can be. I mean, May, the weather will be nice, so hopefully people will be on the terrace as well. But that's one of the things that we're going to do going forward, so that there is another avenue as well. For anyone that goes to the Literature Festival, I'm very open to any suggestions of what we can do to try and capture more food and drink off people. Because as I say, we don't do a great deal.
I think you're right, that it's because it's so difficult.
Yeah.
That you don't do it. That the people attend don't do it.
Yeah.
But I think if it's easier, I think it's more likely.
And the other challenge again is, as I mentioned earlier, no one from the Literature Festival stays generally.
No.
So, you know, we will have, I think, she did give me the numbers, and I don't want to offend her by saying the wrong number. I think they had 6,000 people through the doors. This Literature Festival just gone within that period of what, two days? It's a lot of people. So you've got 6,000 people over the course of 2 days, and you've probably got 500 hotel residents as well. And that's the other balance about, you know, if you were paying £200 to come and stay for the weekend, but understandably you want to have a nice experience and sit in the bar and utilise the facilities. So yeah, there's a balance that we need to strike there, and we haven't quite got it right.
Thank you.
You described your unhappy experience as a young chef at
Yes.
the posh hotel in Birmingham.
Yeah.
How would the experience be different now for a young chef coming to work in your kitchen?
Well, understanding is what I would say. So that's the first thing. It was it was a very old school mentality. So, I mean, I've still got a burn on my hand where one of the chefs scalded me with a hot iron. That was the sort of, behaviour that we were talking about. Yeah, awful, just horrible behaviour. But that was the way it was back in those times. And I know that's alien nowadays because, I mean, it's illegal to do that to someone. But that was just the way that the kitchens were. And it was I'm not making excuses at all because it was awful, absolutely disgraceful. But it was a very, very high pressured hotel. They had a fine dining restaurant that was, meticulous. It was impeccable. It was always busy. There was a waiting list. It was exceptional. We had probably 100 afternoon teas going out every day. There was a brasserie restaurant as well, plus a big hotel. It was very high pressure. And I think that was probably an element of it. But those times have gone. People don't behave like that anymore. And contrary to what, we may see on the TV with, the Gordon Ramsay age and all that sort of stuff, kitchens are not like that anymore. One, because chefs are in such short supply. So if you're unhappy, you're very with your feet, you go and work somewhere else. All of my kitchen brigade, we have 24 chefs. All of them, without doubt, could walk out of my hotel tomorrow and have a job by dinner time, quite confidently, somewhere within Stratford. They're in such high demand, and it's just not how we behave. We spend a lot of time on behaviour. We spend a lot of time on what's right, what's not right. We are a very caring and nurturing business. We reward, we recognise. And I wouldn't accept that. If I ever saw or heard of that going on, I would personally deal with it myself. And there's only one outcome, and that person would be dismissed. We would never ever accept that sort of behaviour. The other thing I would say as well, which is definitely a COVID thing, is around pay. If I look at a chef de partie in our business, pre-COVID, that person probably earned £24,000 a year. Now, I don't know whether you think that's a good or bad salary. That person now earns £34,000 a year. There's been a £10,000 increase on what that person would earn. And before, they would work 50 hours a week for that money. Now they work 40 hours a week for that money, and they get paid for every hour they work over that. And that's how the industry has changed. I go back to earlier, our pay lot has increased 20% within those few years. Single biggest cost is payroll. Yeah, which is why we need to look after people and keep them, because it's such a massive cost when they leave to try and find someone to replace them. Definitely. Yeah.
Could I just bring you back to something that you said, people come to Stratford for more than Shakespeare?
Yes.
And the fact that you've grown your revenue for like 4 years, and you retain your staff, and you get an 87% occupancy rate.
Yeah.
What are the attractions of Stratford?
So, just going to go back to the start. So, Stratford, Shakespeare plays a part, but it's not the single biggest part in my business. Okay. I think if I was standing here with some of my colleagues from other hotels, they may say it plays a bigger part in their business. The backbone of my business is meetings and events. So I'm a very corporate hotel. So, my business is very much Monday through to Friday, or Monday through to Thursday, very corporate. Friday, Saturday is very leisure driven. Sunday's probably the one night of the week where we're probably half full. It's a bit of a non-starter Sunday evenings, and then we're back to it on a Monday. Shakespeare and the RSC, and I apologise if there's anyone in the room with links to the RSC, I find the RSC a very, very difficult business to work with. We had a partnership with the RSC for the 2 previous years that we paid a fortune with. That's not something we renewed this year. For a whole raft of reasons which I won't go into. The opportunity is, thank you. Yeah. The opportunity is definitely around maximising the other spaces that the RSC has got. And I think that's something that they need to realise as well, that the RSC shouldn't just be about Shakespeare. They have got amazing spaces, which when there's no performance on, are empty. I think there's a greater partnership that could be achieved there. It's amazing how much business we turn away in our ballroom because we only have 1 ballroom. If I had 2 or 3 ballrooms, without exaggeration, I promise you, it would be sold every day. You know, if the RSC could take in their auditorium 400, 500 people for a talk or for a conference, which they currently don't do, licensed to print money as far as I'm concerned. I think Stratford historically has had a lot of inbound business, so a lot of tour groups, a lot of Chinese, Asian groups. That business is massive at the moment, and we've really seen the return of China, more so China than Japan. But that business is not profitable, in my opinion. So again, part of our success and our growth has been making some very difficult decisions around what business we were going to keep and what business we were going to have going forward. I think if we look at the hotel in maybe, I don't know, 2010, 2015, probably 40% of all the business that the hotel took would have been tour groups. 6% of all the business that we do now is tour groups. And interestingly, during our period of closure, one thing that we did notice is that those groups that we were having come to us, but sadly obviously couldn't, they didn't stay in Stratford. They went to the fringes of Stratford to stay. And I'm not sure the full reason of why that was, whether it was price. A lot of our colleagues in other hotels took the opportunity of the fire to make a quick buck. They really hiked their rates up to make as much money as they could, which again, in my opinion, is the wrong thing to do. And it definitely didn't benefit the town. And talking to a number of those tourist attractions, they all said they had the worst summer possible. Numbers were down. And I wouldn't be so bold to say that some of that was due to us, but I think it probably was, to be honest. I think our closure probably hindered Stratford and benefited other hotels to Stratford's detriment, if I'm honest. Yeah.
Well, I'm tremendously interested in your statistics.
Yes.
About the people you employed and where they lived. It seems to me to be very much concentrated on local people. Now, one of the things you said, I think I've got it right, said quality of staff.
Yeah.
And I wondered if you took any steps to overcome this. I know what you're talking about, actually. Having sat waiting for a cup of tea for some considerable time.
Yeah.
I just wondered, do you do anything about it? Can you do anything about it?
Well, the only thing you can do, if I'm honest, is you offer a better package to people and you try and entice them in. We have looked at visa sponsorships. You've looked at getting people from other countries. Again, so many hoops now post Brexit that we have to go through. So again, it's not something which will take a month or two. It will take a year or two to try and achieve it. It comes down to training. Yeah, it comes down to training. And one of the things I said earlier around not complicating it, if I'm honest, I think if you pay people more and you look after them, you'll probably keep them. that's not true for everybody, sadly. Yeah, some people will come to the training, they'll take the money, but they still have no interest in.
One last question.
Hi, thanks, Robin. Yeah, a couple of points. Just firstly, of the £11 million that you say have been invested in post-fire, just sort of interested as to what extent, what proportion of that is insurance claim as opposed to actually new investments, stroke enhancement. That's the one sort of point. And then the other point I'm sort of interested in is you say the conference industry is doing really well, but whether it's from the sort of sector of my background, I thought post-COVID, I thought conferences had sort of collapsed a lot of people had sort of gone a lot more to virtual online conferences. So just, interested in your take on that.
So let me answer both of those questions. So 80% of the 11 million has all been insurance. The 20% has been capital investment from ourselves. With the insurance, you can't have anything called betterment. So it has to be like for like, unless what you're procuring doesn't exist anymore, if that makes sense, in which case you have to enhance it. So 80% has been insurance. 20% has been ourselves. And I would also like to add on that probably 70% of all of that investment has been with businesses in the West Midlands. Which is again positive. Second question around conferences. So post pandemic, we really thought we were in for a rough ride. We really thought that conferences were going to bounce back. All this hybrid working, lots of things on Teams and Zoom. That was not the case at all for us. No. And I think some of that is about capacity. So some of the smaller meetings, 12 people, 15 people, totally agree. A lot of that fell by the wayside for quite a long time. The big stuff, the 200s, the 300s, the 400s, that was back with a vengeance. It was so much pent up demand. And I think a lot of big corporates took the view that this is here to stay for a long, long time. And I know that, probably wasn't publicised so much at that time, but I think a lot of businesses thought we're going to have to live with it. So can't just stay at home and do meetings on Teams. We do need to get people together. And we work with some really big businesses you would expect. No, it was all really pent up demand. Very much so.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Robin. That is
Very welcome.
a wonderful insight into one of the
Very, very
big
good.
projects that we have. Very, very glad we got it. Thank you very much. We're going to get the quiz. First one. And on your way out, do you want to look at the books? The background.
Of course I have, yeah.